Simple interest, 6-7. Here we go. Interest is the money paid or earned for the use of money. So you can earn it if you have it in a bank or savings account, or if you have a debt, it is money that you have to pay back. Principal is the amount of money that you start with. So whether you're borrowing money or money that you start in a savings account, it's the principal. That's what we start with. Our rate is a percent, and we're going to have to change that to a decimal every time before we do anything with that in our multiplication. Today, time needs to be in years. So time is in years. Sometimes I'll talk about months, and then you and I need to change that over into years. Otherwise, today we're going to use simple interest, and there's a formula. I like to call it my friend. It's called IPERT, or I equals PRT. So every time we're going to write that on in. Now you can see here it's got a capital I. I'm going to use a lowercase I. And then there's sometimes here where they'll ask you, what's the balance? What do you pay total for your bill or for your account balance after 5 years? Balance is just taking the interest and adding it back to the principal. Every time you're going to write down the formula, I equals PRT, IPERT or IPART, our friend. So here we go. You put money in a savings account that earns 200% interest. What is the interest earned after 5 years? Interest earned, I equals PRT. Again, I'm just going to do PRT because since all the letters are touching, they are multiplying. Principal, the amount of money we start with up here, 200 times. Now be very careful. 2% is our rate, but we need to change that into a decimal. I'm going to come down here where we can see that. 2% gets changed into 0.02. Every time you have to change it into a decimal. So be very careful with that. And here's the time in years. So you multiply that on out. Formula right here. Work right here. And then you get your answer right there. Multiply that into a calculator. Gives you the answer $20. Perfect. Formula, work, answer, and a label. But then they tied this part in here, and they said, what is the balance after 5 years? So normally we just stop here and say the interest is $20. But if they ask, what is the balance after 5 years? Well, you started with $200, and then you earned $20 interest, free money, which means in 5 years, you will now have $220. If they ask for the balance, then there's just this little extra step here you do. Otherwise, for us on your homework, what you're going to say is we're just going to find simple interest. Here we go. This one, you need to add one thing to it. You need to put in after 3 years. There's no time on this one. That's a typo on our part. So again, it says how much interest. Interest. Put down your friend, our friend, IPERT, IPART, however you want to remember it. I equals PRT. Again, where that is the interest, where you take the principal, the amount of money you start with, doesn't matter how much it is, $1,500, woohoo, times your rate. Again, careful, you do not put in 5%. Do not put a 5 in there. You have to take 5% and change it to a decimal. If there is no decimal, that's why the decimal we started here and moved it 2 spots. So you're going to plug in 0.05. Careful when you write that in. Careful when you type that into your calculator. Don't miss that. Don't forget that. And then here we go. 3 years. The time is in years, so you're set to go. Formula, work. Grab a calculator, type it on in, and you get the answer, $225. Formula, work, answer, and label. 4 points, 5 points technically, because you get 1 point for trying on each one of these problems. Again, only said how much interest, 1 step, that's what you do. Sometimes they're just going to give it to you like this. So we're going to have our find the interest. Well, I equals PRT. Great. Here you go. $200 principal. That's what we start with. Your decimal rate. 2.5%. Since there is a decimal, move it 2 times. Add in that 0. So be very careful. It's 0.025 times. Now we got this time, but it's supposed to be in years. So right away, you may look at 6 months and know what that is for a year. But what you just need to know, whether you do or don't know that, is how many months are in a year. There are 12 months in a year. So whenever they give you your time in months, just make it a fraction. If you don't like fractions, then cross your fingers and hope that you can simplify it. So over here, the fraction 6 months, because that's where this came from. This 6 comes from right here. 6 months out of the 12 months, that 12 coming from right here. And then if you can, you're welcome to put that right in here as a fraction. Or if you'd rather, you can just change it into a decimal. Because when you change that and divide it on out, you'll get the answer 0.5 or 1/2. Then multiply it on out. Strange as it seems, you get the answer 2.5, or again, since we're talking money, $2.50. Formula, every time, I part, I equals PRT. Work, where you have the principal, times the rate, times the time, which has to be in years. So if they give it to you in months, put that number of months over 12. If you can change those, divide them into a decimal, great. If that's a repeating decimal, we'll talk about that day 2. Otherwise, again, here we go. How much do you pay for your car? I paid $3,000. That's what it costs, yes. But then you had interest on this loan that you took out for 4 years. So to figure out how much you're actually going to pay for a $3,000 car, it's going to end up being more because of this loan you have. How much more? Well, let's put in our friend, I equals PRT. Principal. How much did it start with? Well, we started with a $3,000 loan for the car. Interest rate, 12%. Times your time of 4 years. So you grab that, type that on into a calculator. Remember, each time you type it in, be very careful. Watch the decimal. Don't forget that it's 0.12. Don't forget a 0. Make sure it's 3,000. And the time is always in years. Awesome. So that's 1440. That's not how much the car costs. Ugh. That's how much interest you got charged. So this car that cost $3,000 at the car lot, you're then going to pay $1,000, $440 more on interest, which means that $3,000 car in the end is going to cost you $4,440. This is true for any car you buy with a loan, also true with a house, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So again, this problem right here, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. So don't cross this off. This is what we're looking at tomorrow. We're going to jump into this into your notes. Otherwise, you can use the simple interest formula. Not only use it, you're going to write it down every time so you remember it. I equals PRT. So your assignment, go back to Google Classroom, and there's a Google form. It's got 4 quick questions on finding just interest, not balance, nothing else. Find the interest using the simple interest formula, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about a little more in depth, talking about finding rates or times or going backwards on things like that.